I am joined today by Anne Jackson. Hello, Anne.
Hello, it is lovely to be here.
Back off the back of your world tour.
I tell you, it felt like it, but yeah.
So, I mean, sensory health, occupational health, this is kind of stuff that's becoming more prevalent and knowledgeable in the world. I think we've got a way to go. I've loved how we've done some of that in the last little while with you. I think we've done more than 50 of these interviews now, which is brilliant. But why did you go from Jersey and fly all the way to America? And what's that got to do with sensory health?
Yes, so many different facets to my journey over the way. But it was great to have a conference in a church, Rock Church, the World Outreach Centre. So I thought, oh, good on them for that. They've got a great name for what they do in reaching out. ISOM, International School of Ministry. So getting my degree in ministry. Next year, I'll get my master's in ministry and business, which will be lovely. But it's there while we were in the church. I have to speak about this first, actually, because while we were in the church, I was like, oh, they've got some of the things that I speak about in the Sensory Healthy Church program. Not everything, obviously, because we all have a way to go. But what was brilliant was that they have this big auditorium, this big church building, but either side of the church building, and it slopes upwards. So it's easier for people at the back to see, like a proper kind of cinema or show place, that kind of thing. But within this slant, as it was going up the hill, they had actually created big, what I call pods, which are enclosed spaces which were glass so that people could see out. And they did call it a family room. They called it a family space. So I've taken some photos of that, and they've given me permission that I can put them inside the Sensory Healthy Church program. But what they didn't have was swings or different seating options for people. So that would be the ultimate. So you could control the temperature, you could control the sound that was coming into it. Obviously, with it being double glazed, it was going to prevent, if the individuals in there were going to be making a fair amount of sound, that was going to help the rest of the congregation. And then I thought, oh, it won't take much for it to be more inclusive or less exclusive than it is even at the moment. And they had a little baby room. They had a smaller room, again, glass, at least the glass frontage, so that the nursing mothers could see out and be connected. And then they had a bigger room next to it. And then those were part and parcel of the church building. And I thought, oh, this is good. It's better than what I've seen so far. And yeah, so that was encouraging. So a little bit of, yeah, just spreading the word about sensory health internationally, because we were from all nations: Vietnam, Madagascar, Australia, the US, Canada, UK. We were just all from everywhere, just coming together in worship, coming together to learn, coming together to acknowledge the work that we've put in, to studying the way that we have, and also sharing ideas of how we can share what we are doing around the world and support one another in whatever sphere we are working in and living in and breathing in.
It must have been such what's the word? Encouragement, exciting just to be amongst people of similar minded kind of ideals of how do we include people who've got issues with sensory health, how do we integrate them into the church, but rather than you trying to talk to people who are struggling to understand that, because that's part of what you do, because we don't really understand it well, you're in a room surrounded by people who, well, not only getting that, they're actually doing it themselves where they are.
To a point, anyway. And then they were definitely open to thinking, what else? What can we do more? And that was one of the biggest issues. I had a conversation with BBC Radio Wales actually this week on my return, just looking at what else, what are the mindsets that we need to shift? What are the things that we need to change? Because nobody wants anybody to be excluded. We just don't know what we don't know. So it's how can we incorporate that? How can we bring that into our spheres gently, but strategically, so that change can actually happen and we can bring as many people with us when we have conflicting needs, often within a church environment in particular. And how do we hold people together?
Having worked in church, I can hear some people say, "Oh, yes, but that's a big church in America. Of course, they can afford to do those things. They've got infinite funding and budgets. They can do whatever they like," which isn't true anyway, but it can feel that way. How can you take some of what you saw over there, where they probably do have some more money for certain things that a smaller church in the UK perhaps doesn't, but for the small church in the UK or anywhere in the world, thinking we don't have access to double glazing, we can barely have a wall and a roof. What could we do? But what can you take from that and think, well, yes, but we can do this instead over here?
Yeah, simple things, even like it was just some sheeting. What do I mean by sheeting? Kind of like blinds, curtains that will dampen sound. Again, so you can just like good old IKEA, we can get those across, get those across the top. And if we weight them down, that really helps with sound. And then you can open them to have as much visual connection or not as you want, and you can have them as see-through as you want. So if there are those that need to jump or bounce or move around inside those areas, then they're kind of screened off by those curtains rather than them being properly double glazed. But anything we can do can help. We'll just increase the tolerance capacity of those in the congregation. Obviously, if it's too invasive, if it's too distracting, that's not going to be helpful for anybody. But if we can limit the distractions, most of us who are neurotypical are able to cope enough, and we can show enough grace and mercy. But it's we need to work with those who don't have the capacity to be as accepting and as tolerant and as in control and as regulated as most of us are.
Which I guess comes back to something that I think we've said before, is it's really good for the church to be a place of worship and reverence. We need to understand, to respect the reason why they're in the first place. But if we're trying to create that place of reverence and we think that means silence, well, we've missed the point anyway, because reverence isn't about silence. It's just about honoring who God is to us and to others, and honoring the space and letting people worship. But actually, much like a family, if we're trying to say, well, it needs to be silent, it ain't never going to happen, is it?
No, no, and heaven's not silent. I mean, it's lovely. Every now and again, I just keep hearing a preacher say, like, like who says that heaven's quiet? It's like, huh? It's like, I don't think so. So, and it's about, it's looking at what actually is that service there for. It's like it is there for a worship experience. It's there for a celebration. We're not there as respite for families with differences, with different needs. We can provide respite at other times of the week. For sure, we want to be caring and loving, but that's not what Sundays are for. That's not what our church gatherings are for. Our church gatherings are for every single person to be able to come together in worship and celebration and love and honor. And that's what it's about. It's not about, oh, let's, take your child away so that you can concentrate on the worship. I just think I understand that, but I don't think it's right. I don't think it's right.
I always come back to the same thing. Feeding of the 5,000. Okay. In the Bible, it tells us that Jesus was there and he spoke to 5,000 men, which meant there were men with wives. They're men with families. So that 5,000 people of men probably is nearer 20, 25,000. I mean, how can you even estimate that? But we're talking probably several, many, many more thousands. 15, 20,000 was my estimate one day. And there were no Sunday schools, and there were no breakout rooms, and there were no Zoom calls. There was no video, and yet Jesus spoke to 25,000 people, 20,000. Let's just call it 10,000 people. I've been to big church, 30,000 people. Maybe that's not far off what Jesus did. How on earth was he heard? Not a clue. Not interested in that. But he spoke to them, and they were all there. And if you've got mums and husbands are there, and the wives are there, and the little children, some of them won't be quiet. And we don't see in the Bible that said, Jesus said, get them out of here, take them out to a side room. We understand the idea of, dedicated time, and that's important. But actually, I always go back to the feeding of the 5,000, because if Jesus did that, shouldn't we use that as a model for church?
And I love the bit when he says, when the disciples are saying, what do we do with the children? He said, no, let the children come to me. And he then didn't turn around and say, right, okay, now you go and take the children away and give them a Sunday school. He's like, where is it? All of those occasions when the children were bringing their bread and their loaves and their fishes, or that they were coming with something and they were meeting Jesus, or that they were there in the conversations, or there was household salvation. It's just they're there. There was never one occasion when Jesus said, look, will you take the children away and you disciple them separately? Every single biblical account we have, it's like parents, it's like the extended family. It's yeah.
I suspect you and I have a bit of a bias. That bias may now be quite obvious. Um,
I don't think I've ever been so just kind of like that.
well, no, me neither. I tend to be quite careful, but I think this is the point. I think it's not political, and this is actually basic foundational stuff, and relating to sensory health, relating to inclusion of people who would struggle with noise. I mean, I've led services. I've worked full time in church. I've had people who are in their 80s and 90s saying we can't see the screen. It's too far away. We can't hear it, and I can't see it. And I'd say to them, move closer to the screen. Well, can't you make it much bigger? To a degree, yes. But if you've got a TV and you keep making the words bigger and bigger and bigger, do you know what's easier? Move forwards, because there's only so many words you can get on a screen. And actually, people who have got hard of hearing sitting at the back corner in a little alcove and they can't hear the service, turn it up. No, we can't. Why don't you move and sit nearer to a speaker? I don't like that seat. Well, which one do you want?
Yes.
And there does need to be a degree of using a little bit of logic of saying, if you can't hear, move nearer to a speaker. If you can't see, move nearer to a screen. Or, dead simple, give somebody who is hard of vision, perhaps, a large print sheet, which we used to do for some people as well, so they could get involved in the singing because they couldn't see the screens, no matter how big we put it. And there are some simple things. That's just one that I would do. I would make sure if I knew there were old folk coming who couldn't see, or not necessarily old folk, there's an interesting little stigma. You know, doesn't have to be old to struggle with your sight or your hearing. But I give them a big blown up version of the stuff, and it was like a little book. Oh, it's a bit of money. So who cares? Now they're engaging in a service. Isn't that the point?
And I think when you've got your team, because we've got at the moment, most of our church model, our church ways of doing things, you've got a team going here, you've got a team going there for this age, this, that, and the other. Everybody's split. And if you just thought, if you had all of those team members all together helping to support someone who might be able to, you know, regardless of age, what their vision's like or what their hearing's like or where they need to move, you use those people who have a heart for service, which is beautiful, but actually you combine all of those capacities and strengths and skills into bringing people together, including people, and boy, you have an amazing time together. That's the beauty of it. And actually, everybody only needs to do something for 5 minutes, rather than you've got loads of different teams doing lots of things and taking hours to prepare just for one service. But actually, just bring it all together, and it's a lot less work for everybody. But it's something together and something really powerful.
Definitely revealing some of my biases on how churches should be run, because that's exactly what I would do. I would get rid of all the little groups and we'd have one big thing going on. It's easier for everybody. Let me go one step further. I think a lot of what goes on in organized, traditional, structured church services is really exhausting. And I think there is a much easier way to engage with many more people, much more easily, much cheaper, by the way, and with less resources of people and stuff, and actually an easier outcome. Coming back to sensory health, because definitely gone on a very good tangent, but how do we help people who are thinking, yeah, that's great, but I don't know what to do? How do I engage? I've got a 15-year-old person who comes into our church with his parents. He screams and shouts. He can't cope. You know, isn't it just better get him out of the church? We'll set them a sheet to go home with, and they can do that, and then it's easier for everybody else. Pretty common situation, I would think, and I've certainly seen that, and I've stepped in to prevent that. But how do you help churches engage with that 15-year-old who is struggling with their sensory health, and the lights are too bright and they're flickering because that LED thing is clicking away in the background? It's driving the nuts, and me too. And the sound is booming because that speaker's broken and crackling. And well, any normal sane person would be going completely mad, but somebody who's got sensory health and sensitivity to those things, it's going to be on a different level of uncoping. So how do we engage well with families and with churches to say there are some really easy things you can do?
Yeah. Please, more than anything, go to sensoryhealthychurch.com and get the free resource. That is a 3 hours, you know, anything that you need, we can connect through that. But a questionnaire is the simplest thing that I know, or something on the website where someone can actually fill in a form before they come to a church, or that there is a questionnaire that you send out, or it's something that a family takes with them where they have highlighted. I have environmental adaptation forms people could fill in. There are questionnaires where we literally go through every single sense to help people who know that they're bothered, but they might not know specifically what to say. So I take them through things to consider, and then they write that down and think, well, actually, yeah, it's the LED lights that are bothering me, but normal lights are fine. So you be really, really specific, and then you can go to the church, and that's what if when you have pastors in a church, that's their job to be pastoral. There are loads of other people who might be evangelists, and they might not. That's not their thing. Don't go to the evangelist if you want to have somebody to listen to your needs. But we have pastors in the church. That's most of our eldership should have, pastors, and that's what we call most of our church leaders anyway. Whether they do actually have the pastoral gift, I suppose, is another thing. But there will be people within the church that have that pastoral gift and that want to take time to listen. So if you have things written down that just describe, it's not judgmental. It's just describing these are the things that I find hard. All these things that I might find hard. Can we just check if what is going on in your church? Or in the church that I go to, I've noticed I've been there for years now, and actually it's this, and this that I struggle with. And then you can have that conversation. All those things that you were drawing out about whereabouts even that you sit. How close are you? What are the little things like having large print, something like that? What are those things that are going to make a difference?
I remember reading one time, actually read this. It wasn't a video or anything. It was a proper written blog, and it was a pastor who talked about some of the complaints they had on any given Sunday morning. The music was far too loud. The music was far too quiet. The songs were far too fast. The songs were far too slow. That person spoke far too fast. They spoke far too slow. The sermon was far too long. The sermon was far too short. And these opposites were on the same day. Not all of them at the same time. But this is the point. There's no point in going to the person who's preached or led the worship or been doing the prayers and saying it's too fast, too slow, too loud, too quiet, because you know what? I can promise you somebody else in the room will disagree with that. However, it is worth going to saying, I was really struggling with what was going on. Can you help me engage more with what's going on in this church? Here's a quick example. The Book of Common Prayer. If you go to a Church of England church in the UK, many of them still would have a Book of Common Prayer service. What do I mean by that? It's literally a book. You open the book and it tells you what you're supposed to say because you're speaking together, or the person at the front is speaking something and you repeat back the next line. So you have a book and it guides you through. Now, the really sensible churches will say, right, let's move to page 17. Let's go to page 4, because you jump around the book quite a lot. A lot of churches that are less helpful expect you to know what page you're supposed to go to. And you can see people who don't know the church because they're flicking through the book thinking, where have we gone? Oh, now they're not even in the book. It's an addendum for this church, and now it's complicated. But the original idea of the Book of Common Prayer was something simple that could be standardized. And there's some really great stuff in there, by the way. But when you sort of go off on one, now you've just lost people. And now actually it's even worse because, well, I've got this book. Now what? Mm. So how do we engage with churches better? I think there's two strands which we always come back to, don't we? There's one of the person who's struggling needs to know how to come to the church and actually have the confidence, and the people in the church need to know they already know they're struggling with that 15-year-old child who can't be quiet. They're already in a place of defensiveness because people generally attack them. Well, can't you just shut him up, or let me take you outside? These things are not helpful. So how do we help how do I word this carefully? How do we help the helpful people in church who are less helpful because they just want to remove the problem?
I think remove is a good word, because what was I think while you were talking, there was something that was coming to mind. I hope it comes back as I'm talking out now to you. But it's about the fact that it's not about removing, and it's about, again, it's the heart of what we are there for. That church service is not for us; it is for God. It is something that he has said that it's right for us to do, because he knows it's good for us when we can come and turn things around and flip our attention all on him and take it all off ourselves, because we're so self-centered. So there's a lot of, I think there's the continuing preaching into that, the continuing reminding of why on earth we come together. Obviously, yeah, it's not going to be absolutely awful. Otherwise, yeah. But there's also, we can move to a different church if that church is not going to be able to accommodate, because of some places, perhaps the echo environment is just one that we're not going to be able to change. We might be able to dampen things a little bit. We might be able to have headphones. We might be able to have ear defenders. We might be able to have background sounds playing in somebody's ears so that other sounds are less difficult for them. But at the end of the day, it might just be easier for them to go to a different church. I mean, we should have that freedom because we're all part of the same body anyway. So it's finding something, finding the good fit for you. But ultimately, it's not about removing people. It is having that genuine conversation of what the vast array of inclusion, what that looks like. So having someone walking quietly, pacing around at the back, they may not sing, they may not speak, they may not engage in the prayers, they may not look as though they're there at all. But I do trust that the Holy Spirit is working because that person is within fellowship and is in a place that is just dedicated to what God is doing and who He is for that time.
Now, today we've gone heavily into church because you've just come back from an experience of a big church in the States. You have sensory health information and resources for churches to engage with people. But most of this advice is never going to be restricted purely to a church, because whatever we're talking about, an office, a restaurant, cafe, I don't know, it doesn't matter. All this sort of stuff actually can help people engage with us. And from a business point of view, if you're running a shop or a cafe or a restaurant, engaging with people better is going to reap more profit for you from a business perspective, because people will want to come back. And if they found a place that their 15-year-old who shouts, actually, there's something to help them, they'll bring their friends who I guarantee they're going to have. And in the context of a church, okay, it's not about making money, but it is about including people who can come and worship God, which is the whole point of having a church service on a Sunday morning, or at least it should be. If people want to know more about this, the Sanctuary Healthy Church, what is it they actually have to do? Because again, I see both sides of this, and they'll be thinking, yeah, but how much it's going to cost? What we're going to do? How complicated it's going to be? How many committees do we got to have? Are we really going to help anybody? Is there any point, any value? What we're going to actually achieve? I can hear all the excuses for why let's not bother going there, but actually, although I know they wouldn't get that experience from you, how do we help the beleaguered church leader who is tired and stressed to find some help from what it is that you can help them with?
Yeah, well, I'm offering every year I offer 6 weeks to a sensory healthy church. Now that can be just an open time where any church leader, any church member can come and join with me for 6 weeks in the year. There is the free program, that's a 3-hour video program that people can access. But the 6 weeks is just a way of me being able to come alongside someone, whether it be one-to-one with an individual church, to work out ways of connecting with the whole leadership, work out ways of connecting with the whole membership. And then that's just an ongoing every 6 weeks, every year. I'm trusting that will be just an ongoing support, an ongoing offer to the church, so they can come back in for 6 weeks into the sensory super system, into the Christian sensory support that I offer. Anyway, just for Christians, there's a regular sensory support for those that are not looking for faith-based input. But that's what I trust from here going forward from 2025 onwards, that we will have 6 weeks to a sensory healthy church every year, and that once you're in it once, you can just come back in year after year. So there is that ongoing support. And as the network grows, there'll be more and more people, even locally to where you are, who will be able to come along and support any work that anybody wants to do in that area.
We're coming right back to the idea of that church that you went to visit. They've got double glazed pods, areas, specialized rooms. One of the things that we do in our radio studio, which is a really cheap fix, you can buy really fantastically expensive acoustic panels. We have a big thick duvet that we bought that goes on a rack. Well, it does the same job, and actually this is quite pretty because you can put a different cover on there, and all of a sudden this ugly frame of the duvet becomes kind of cool. We've got an orange duvet cover on it at the moment. We can put anything we wanted on there. It's really cheap. It's 12, 15 quid for a thick duvet. Hang it up with some bulldog clips. There we go. Now we got a sound deadening wall. People don't necessarily think about that, but it works. It's super cheap. And in effect, that's kind of a lot of what you're talking about. There are some really simple things we can do to improve things for people without excluding them, without removing them, but actually bringing them in. And God willing, over time, that person who is more tensed up because it's a new experience over time, and I've seen this, and I'm sure you would have as well, they then start to relax, and all of a sudden, all the things we've had to put in place, now they're more comfortable. We can not get rid of them, but now they're not used so much.
Yeah, you can just ease off, and that's the thing. But you ease off when they're ready. You have things available that don't cost the earth, obviously, and then you just, yeah, when they don't need them, it's nice if they can go and access things if they need to, but when they don't need to, they will relax into it because that's exactly what happens. Yeah, things just ease off a bit, and then yeah, life is so much easier for them and for everyone else around them too.
Which is surely the goal of church. I mean, of all the things that we're involved in, the one thing that we should be working to make people feel as though they really are valued and really are important is in a church situation where we have already realized that we are valuable to God and so is everybody else.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love church. I love going to church. I'm very conscious that I don't think we're there yet for everybody. I don't think everybody's feeling that, but at least it's nice to know that, yeah, we are doing something right. There's just more.
And as we said, and I keep on saying this, there's always something we can do. And if we each do the little thing that we can do, and all of us do lots of little things that we can do, all of a sudden we're doing an awful lot more, perhaps with less committees, with less group think, but more, how can I serve somebody? How can I make their life better? Holding a door open for somebody who's in a wheelchair, it's not exactly complicated. It doesn't take much of an effort. And all of a sudden, you've just made this room more accessible to them. You don't have to do it in a condescending, patronizing way, but actually, all of a sudden, you're opening up a room. That's really, really simple, quick thing. I remember another thing we did, which we've talked about several times, a tent for somebody who had, I can't even remember what the central health issues are. It doesn't really matter. We had a tent. They had big ear defenders. If it got too much, the ear defenders got on. If it got too much more, they'd go and sit in the tent in a slight ante room. Or was it a £5 pop-up tent or something? Cost virtually nothing. And eventually their need for the air defenders in the tent diminished to the point we put it out every week thinking, what's the point? We did because we love them. They could have a bad day. They want a tent. But actually the air defenders were rarely used to the point they were basically never used. And the tent just sat there almost gathering dust. Not pointless though.
No, no. And to have that there as a, and then also because you never know who else might come in. And we want our churches to be, people are being added daily to the church. That's our biblical example. And it's like, well, that's when we show we have that available for people, and that at least they think, oh, yeah, okay, that they might accommodate something different. You might not need a pop-up blackout tent, but actually you might want to be able to sit on something else and just have a little bit of movement or whatever your thing is. And it just shows that there is an openness to looking at doing things differently. And therefore, yeah, stress really reduces when you feel as though you're even partly going to be understood. There is a sense of relaxation and calm and hope that comes into somebody's nervous system, literally in their nervous system. And then they are less sensitive to sensory issues. So it's a win-win.
Not the conversation I thought we'd have today, but brilliant all the same. I don't have lots of plans for these. People who know me well, I make lots of plans. Interviews, not so much. We go wherever it goes, and it makes it more fun. And thank you. If people are interested in the Century Healthy Church, you're talking about this 6-week program. Is that gone or is that in the future?
That is March. So we're going to have 4 weeks in March and then 2 weeks in September. So we think that's going to be the yearly plan. So every March we'll take 4 weeks to look, and then we have time to go away in your churches, try things, and then halfway again. So kind of like halfway through the year, there'll be 2 touch points to be able to come back, because everybody's going to be coming into learning about sensory health and the different things that they can do at different times of the year. So it's nice if we can have like 2 touch points throughout the year, concentrating in March, getting folks ready for Easter so that we can have a really amazing celebration for everything that Easter means in the Christian world. And then in September, heading towards Christmas. So our two biggest events, hopefully a little bit not too close to either Easter or Christmas, but enough to make a concentrated effort to think, right, what can we do in these next few weeks? And we just focus for a few weeks at a time.
Fab. And I love that if people have missed one thing, there's another one coming and another one and another one. So if you've missed one, don't worry, there'll be another one around the corner, sort of, so to speak. And thank you. If people want to know more about you, go to pure247radio.org/ALJ, pure247radio.org/ALJ. And Lord Jackson, thank you kindly.
Thank you.